Hello, you are very welcome back to the Wellness Script podcast. I'm Lauren O'Reilly, I'm your host and a qualified pharmacist. Today's episode is a little bit different. We will be doing a solo cast, so that's just me and you having a little chat together, and I'm going to be talking about, well, first of all, why I started this podcast. I feel like after 8 episodes you deserve a little bit of a background as to why it exists, but also I want to share my 5 wellness rules for life. So I'm really excited to talk about those because I've been in the wellness space now for probably close to a decade and a qualified pharmacist for 5 years. But in my personal life, I've come up against different health challenges and personal challenges, and I've come up with a kind of set of rules or guidelines and things that I follow that make my life better and make it easy for me to follow a healthy way of living in the way that makes sense for me. So I hope that this is valuable for you, and I hope that you've been enjoying the episodes so far. I've been learning so much, and I really hope you have too. We've learned everything from hair loss to female fitness. We've also been talking about gut health from a dietitian. We've been decluttering our homes to have a space that feels more in line with our wellness, and so much more. So make sure you do go back and listen to all of the episodes of season 1 if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do subscribe or follow wherever you're listening or watching, because it really does help the podcast to grow. And I'm already super excited for season 2, which starts from next week. We're going to be talking about everything from our sleep to period recovery to our nutrition when it comes to everything from IVF to endometriosis, talking about PCOS. There's a huge range of topics coming up for everyone out there that's going to be beneficial, whether it applies to you or someone that you know. So do stay tuned and do subscribe so that you never miss another episode. With all that said, let's kick into my, reason for starting this podcast. I started making content when I was in college, and when I say content, that's like making my videos on Instagram and later on TikTok. I made it back in college because I realized how much information was missing out there, and how much misinformation was spreading, both in person as I was studying to be a pharmacist. I worked every weekend in a pharmacy, and I'd speak to people and give them information, and I realized how much of a difference that could make, that having that right piece of information means that you make a better decision for your health or for somebody in your family's health. And they would come back into the pharmacy that I was working in, the following Saturday, and say, that piece of advice that you gave me, those eyelid wipes or those, whatever, even if it wasn't a product, if it was a piece of advice that I gave them, that it made it such a huge difference, in their life, and that was hugely powerful for me. And then I saw the same rippling whenever I went online and talked about different health information, and especially during the pandemic. It was really, it felt important to me to be able to give information on more than a one-to-one basis, but to be able to speak with you like this. So I'm really excited to kind of continue to also explore topics that that I don't have deep expertise on, and get experts in like we've been doing, and learn together, because I'm as much of a student as you are listening when it comes to all of the different wellness topics that we're covering on here. But as a pharmacist, I want to talk about wellness rules for life. I feel like I've really got those honed in now. So the first rule that I live by is that the early bird catches the worm. This is one that I learned back in 2019. I was doing my pharmacy placement in industrial pharmacy, and I just felt like this is a new opportunity now. I have 6 months to do this placement before I go back to college. The way that I was living my life was in a state of stress, and I don't know if anyone listening can relate to this, but I'm very type A person, very, probably naturally highly strung, and I have to kind of fight against that. So I found that, with college and everything being so intense, something had to give. And where I found I was most stressed was in the morning leaving the house, because I had been, up late studying, whatever. I'd get up at the very last minute and I'd be racing around. I'd forget my lab coat, and then obviously that has a knock-on effect on your day, or you'd miss the bus, and then you're really starting the day on the back foot and feeling stressed, and then you arrive into college or work or whatever you're doing and you're feeling really stressed. And so I took the time in that stage of my life when it kind of shifted, and I read this book, and it was called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and it contains these kind of 6 steps that I followed. Now, I'm not telling you to get up at 5:30 in the morning. I don't do that now, but I did at the time. I did it for, those 6 months while I was on placement, and it shifted how I think about mornings forever. Even if I don't continue to get up that early, I always get up earlier than is necessary to give myself that time to breathe, to think, to, ease into the day, rather than just like wake up, run out the door. We're in fight or flight, we're stressed, our cortisol is through the roof. It raises when we wake up, but it's raised even more if we're stressed, and it's just not a nice way to start the day. So I always like to start my day from a place of calm. So the 6 steps that were in that book, if you'd like to know them, the acronym is SAVERS. So silence, meaning meditation. A is for affirmations. V is for visualization. So visualizing things going well has been a really helpful tool for me in terms of my well-being and attaining goals that I've wanted to achieve. E is for exercise. So while you may not have time for a full workout in the morning, depending on your schedule, even getting a little bit of stretching in. I've got, I use an app called Down Dog for yoga that you can tailor the time that they generate the workout. So you could do like a 9-minute workout, a yoga session, just to kind of start off your day on the right foot, quite literally. Then the R is for reading. So if you could read a couple of pages of a book that gives you peace. Another book that I'm going to recommend, actually, this is becoming lots of book recommendations, but I really recommend it. It's called The Daily Stoic, and that was my answer to fitting in a little bit of reading at the start of the day, because it's 365 meditations for 365 days of the year. So each day you just read a new page, and that was my reading piece, and it gave me a chance to reflect, and it also fed into the following step, which is S for scribe. I think he kind of tweaked that one to fit the acronym, but basically just journaling and writing about your thoughts. So that was my opportunity to check in, and if you spend 5 minutes on each of those, you'd spend a 30-minute kind of session in the morning, really setting yourself up for the day. And look, I know that's not something that everybody can afford to do time-wise or get up earlier by that amount, but even giving yourself, applying the principle and giving yourself an extra 10 minutes to yourself, or getting up before everyone else in the house gets up, just to set yourself up for the day, can be a really nice way to mean that, to kind of check in with yourself, to have a bit of gratitude for what the day holds, to give yourself a bit of space to breathe, whether it's with your cup of coffee or whatever. But that just really gave me a mindset shift. And it also brought me back to, I remember when my now late Nana Pauline, when I stayed with her, she'd always be up so early, and you could hear her cooking or doing her little bits in the morning. She had 6 kids, so she learned to get up ahead of the pack and ahead of everyone else, because I guess that was just her time in the morning to get her head together ahead of a busy day and a busy household. So I like to think of her when I think of, getting up that little bit earlier and giving yourself that headspace. So that's rule number 1. So rule number 2 is getting the basics right before buying. So basics over buying is how I would summarize that one. And what I mean by that is, while I do take supplements and I optimize my health by, investing in certain wellness tools, and you'll see me talk about them from time to time, but they are an add-on after you have everything else right. So in terms of the basics, I look to number 1 being sleep. So sleep, and you're going to love the conversation I have coming up with Tom Coleman in season 2, because I ask him all of the questions about sleep that you're going to love hearing the answers to, because it's so insightful. But sleep, starts from the minute we wake up and the choices that we make. Like, for example, getting up that bit earlier, getting some sunlight into our eyes. I'm looking at some lovely Dublin sunshine here as I record this. But this morning even, I got up early and I stood outside because it was a beautiful sunny day. But even if it's not, it's overcast, you can still get a benefit from getting natural sunlight into your eyes, especially within about 30 to 60 minutes of waking up. It means that it kickstarts your circadian rhythm, and it means that then your melatonin is going to be released at the right time that night, and helping you to get that better sleep that evening then. So you know, the importance of that, even that little step of waking up a bit earlier, but also thinking about your sleep from the moment you wake up. And then obviously as we wind down in the evening, not, you know, the blue light is one thing, but also the stimulus from social media. If we're scrolling or watching like really high paced kind of content and videos, stimulus coming in right until the moment we go to sleep, it can be really hard to sleep. So really just think about that in terms of a basic. The other basics that I think about would be our nutrition, of course. So a diet that I recommend following and that you'll probably find coming up a lot through these conversations is the Mediterranean diet. It's largely plant-based with some lovely omega-3 oily fish thrown in there, like our salmon, our mackerel. And it's kind of a diet that naturally lends itself to less processed foods, because we've got our, you know, in terms of, we've got our fibre, our vegetables, our protein source, which can be something like an oily fish, and protein coming from beans and legumes as well. So it really is a lovely diet to follow. And it also replaces our saturated fats, like from our butter, with unsaturated fats from our olive oil, which is more heart healthy. So those are like two obviously key pillars. And then of course our exercise. So sleep, diet and exercise are just pivotal to get right. If we're not addressing those, supplements are only like putting a plaster on like a broken leg. Do you know what I mean? So we really have to kind of address the basics of our lifestyle first and foremost, and then look at everything else. Exercise, when I talk about exercise, if exercise were a pill, like in terms of the benefits that you could list for it, it would be a sellout, like a blockbuster, like some crazy pharmaceutical company would make loads of money off it, because the benefits of exercise are just insane. Like they're just like everything from, you could list your bone health benefits, muscle benefits, obviously we have our heart health with you know, cardiovascular deaths being the leading cause of death here in Ireland. It's a hugely important element when we think about our exercise. It also has benefits in terms of our, obviously we all feel better, so it benefits our mood, but also benefits our brain health, lowers our risk of developing, you know, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, that kind of thing. It's helping with our blood flow. The benefits are just huge when it comes to exercise. So I can't overstate that enough. Getting our diet, our sleep and our exercise right, only then do we look to adding on other things. And look, it's like when we want to start a new hobby as well, always go for the basics first. A lot of us will say, I want to run, oh, but I don't have the right runners, and like, you know, so then we go out and buy the really expensive runners, or buy the really expensive bicycle or something, because we want to get into cycling or yoga mat or whatever. But really, all of those things are A, delaying us from starting the thing, and B, unnecessary to start. Like, we just want to start with the minimal viable product, the, you know, the kind of the most basic version of the health or wellness habit, or you know, yeah, I suppose the habit that we want to implement, because adding on and getting too complicated just is a barrier for us, you know, as humans, any of us. So when we overcomplicate things, that's when it gets tricky. And when I say about the Mediterranean diet as well, I want to say, like, you know, it's not that we can't have any treats. Like, I definitely follow probably an 80-20 or 90-10. Well, on a better week, probably more like an 80-20 rule, in terms of eating well most of the time and then having my treats as well. You know, having one ultra processed food isn't going to kill you. You know, it's about the habits that we build over time. So I think that's really important as well. Rule number 3 is that prevention is better than cure. I am huge on preventative measures that we can implement in our life, because there's so many that we can talk about here. So in terms of, like, recently I had this example, right? I knew I needed to go to the dentist. My gums were hurting me, and I was like, I floss, you know, I try my best to prevent any kind of dental abscess decay. I don't want to get down that road, so I floss twice a day, I brush my teeth, everything, and I try to look after my teeth as best I can. But I had this niggle, so I went into the dentist and they were like, yeah, there's nothing there really, you could probably floss your back teeth a little bit better, but there's no infection, and just make sure that you're looking after your molars. I was like, but like, I have pain. And then they said, oh yeah, that's because you grind your teeth, right? And I was like, no, I don't know that. So I found out that I was grinding my teeth, and I said, you know, okay, so that must be at night time, I don't know I'm doing it. And they're like, no, you probably do it during the day as well, if you're the kind of person who's who's clenching their jaw, and this kind of ties back to my point about being a type A kind of person. So it's something that I'm working on, being a little bit more relaxed and less stressy. But that is also speaking to the point of treating the whole person. So because I'm maybe I'm stressed in my life, or the way that I carry stress in my body, that's manifesting in terms of my physical well-being. And I suppose that dentist recognizing that in me, being like, we know about you, your career, everything, and it's likely that we see this pattern coming up, that you're grinding your teeth. We can see it in your teeth. We can see that that's what's causing your gum pain. And so now I have a night guard. But the point being, long story short, I wouldn't have known that, only I went for a checkup because I had a little idea that something was off. Even though it wasn't like an infection, I didn't have crazy pain, I just thought it was worth getting a checkup done, and so I did. And I see this all the time. A lot of the problems that come up in pharmacy that are, bad problems, like people with really bad back pain, like pain is obviously a huge area that comes up in a pharmacy setting, whether it's short term or something that someone's dealing with on a long-term basis. They might be getting painkillers, or something that I'm having a conversation with them about. And a lot of the time it's something that has built up over a long period of time. It's the toll that it takes on the body, and that they've been suffering for a while, and maybe it's a sports injury that they never fully addressed, or maybe it's the way that they work with their shoulders up around their ears like 8 hours of the day, or their job is sedentary, meaning they're sitting for most of the day. All of this is to say that it's the long-term impact of our daily habits and the things that we also don't address. It's not all things that we do, but things that come up that we notice that we don't get checked quickly. Like, I'd always rather go to a healthcare professional and for them to say, you're fine, these are things that you could improve, but you're fine, whether that's a physio or a dentist or whatever, than leave it and wonder. I think it's money really well spent. I know it costs to see these professionals, but I think it's really money well spent, because then I see people spending so much more to get out of a much worse situation. And the other thing I would say as well is always see a healthcare professional. So I mentioned pain, I mentioned back pain in particular. That's a huge one where people are seeing unregulated professionals. Some good, some bad, but the point being, because it's not a regulated profession that they're going to see in relation to their back pain, it's not really falling under the prevention is better than cure, bracket, because actually there can be harm done, and it's always first do no harm. So if you're going to see somebody about a niggle in your back or a bit of a pain, make sure that they are a qualified professional, because we definitely don't want to do harm. We want to prevent harm being done. So in that respect, I would say anyone who has muscular pain, or an injury or back pain that's been going on, go and see a physiotherapist. That's your best protocol. And then because they're healthcare professionals and they've studied the body and the systems within the body, they know when to refer. They know, okay, this is back pain, but actually this could be a sign of something else. This could be to do with the kidneys. This could be, so that they're ethically, and also in terms of their training, they will refer you on to the relevant healthcare professional. So prevention is better than cure is my point. Rule number 4 is inspired by a conversation I had with a lady that I know recently, and it was, I was talking about health. I was, talking about heart health. It was a topic that I was speaking about on the TV recently on the RTE Today show, and so it came up in conversation, and I asked her, how is your health? How do you get checkups? Do you get your blood pressure checked? And she said, no. I'm afraid they'll tell me something I don't want to know. And that breaks my heart, to be honest, because obviously I understand where it comes from, ignorance is bliss, and I'd rather not be told that something's wrong and now I have to get treatment or whatever. And it is scary sometimes to go to see a healthcare professional about something that you're concerned about because you're afraid of the answer. But honestly, I can definitely tell you that the earlier that things are spotted, generally the better the outcome, and the higher the likelihood that it will be able to be treated, of course. So you know, it's just so important that we know our numbers. And within that, I suppose, of course, with our heart health, we're talking about our blood pressure, we're talking about cholesterol levels, our blood sugar levels, and getting those checked. But if someone's over 40, for example, definitely seeing your GP once a year at least. For anyone, like even for myself, I get my bloods done every year because it took me a good few years to realise that I was anemic, meaning I had low iron and I was exhausted. Like I needed a nap in the middle of the day and I didn't know. And there's so many, especially young girls and women who are iron deficient and don't know because they haven't had their bloods checked. So I'm a huge advocate of that, especially if you're feeling tired, you're feeling exhausted all the time, and no matter how much sleep you get, you're not feeling rested. That's always something that should be checked out. You know, don't just accept exhaustion as normal, because it's not normal to feel tired all the time. And that's a huge reason why I would prompt people to get their bloods checked and to check in with their GP. But that's one area. And then the other thing is getting our screening done. So for example, I'm 28, so I got my first cervical screening, or it used to be called the smear test. My first cervical screen when I was 25 when it was due, and then between 25 and 29 it's every 3 years, so I'm due one now in the next 2 weeks. So I booked in for that the other day, and then after that it's every 5 years unless they spot something they want to keep a close eye on. So that's one example. There's also bowel screening, and I'll put the links and the information in the show notes below for you to reference. We have breast check for women as well over the age of 50. All of these different checks that we can get done. I'm speaking about Ireland, but I'm sure in other countries that are tuning in as well, like the UK with the NHS, there are publicly available screening programs in place that are beneficial for you. There's a reason the government invests in them. It's because they work. They lower the chances of us getting really sick and increase the chances of something being spotted early that can be cleared and prevent us from being really unwell. So avail of all of the screening programs that are available to you, and I would say don't accept anything as normal just because it's always been this way, whether it's painful periods or extreme tiredness. You know your own body, and it's really important to kind of address anything that's coming up and know your numbers, because as well that's a great motivation to improve them. So if you know that your cholesterol is at this level and you spent the year being really on your game, you're exercising, which is beneficial for your cholesterol levels as well, by the way, you're exercising, you are eating healthy, you're doing your very best, and then you see the numbers improve, well, that's really motivating. Like anytime we see our numbers improve, whether it's the speed that we run or something else, it's really motivating to see that, well, I did this work and now it improved my metrics. So what gets measured gets improved is the thing, isn't it? So that's the thing that I focus on health and well-being as well. And finally, rule number 5, being in the space of social media. This is a huge one I want to touch on, and if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. What do I mean by that? I mean that I get targeted for ads, right? As I said, I'm 28, but I get targeted for these ads for menopause and perimenopause supplements. And I've been asked about them numerous times by followers, by people that I know in person as well. And they must have a huge marketing budget because it's been reaching lots of people. And what they do, as an example, is they target a vulnerable population, which is perimenopausal women who are suffering from symptoms that are bothering their life in terms of a wellness perspective. They target them with their marketing, which we know that you can do through all of the social media platforms. You can target by age and gender demographics in a certain area. And they say, this is what I saw in the ad, target your stubborn belly fat, or gets rid of stubborn belly fat, basically promising to address one of the big concerns that perimenopausal women have, which is how during that time in our lives it changes the way that our body stores fat, and it changes also how our body looks, and so a lot of women can be conscious about that. So they're addressing that insecurity by saying that this supplement is going to take away your belly fat. And that's just one example. There's plenty of examples out there for men, for younger women, for all of us, that they're targeting us because we're vulnerable about this particular topic. And a lot of the time it falls under wellness, a lot of the time it falls under weight. So a lot of you know, you'll see, quote, I'm doing air quotes for anyone who's not watching me, who's listening, detox teas, which a lot of the time I've seen containing laxatives. So, you know, it's not detoxing you, it's actually just a laxative that you don't need. So you're going to spend your days on the toilet losing your nutrients, which is just so harmful, and losing water weight, which is not true weight anyway. Don't get me started on that. But if something sounds too good to be true, from a wellness perspective, it probably is. I'll only ever look at the evidence when it comes to, you know, wellness products and tools and hacks and all that kind of stuff that we can do. And if you see me speaking about something, it's because I've done my research and because the evidence is there to support its use, and that it certainly doesn't do any harm. You know, a lot of the things that work really well, we've been doing for so long. And now we're seeing the science coming to back that up as well. Like, for example, yoga, obviously that's age old, but we see now so much science backing up why it's beneficial for us. Even during COVID, they were saying how beneficial it is for our well-being, getting through illness and that kind of thing. And then obviously, you know, I think that there's so much that goes hand in hand with modern medicine. We can look after ourselves in terms of a practical approach. We can get massages, we can do yoga, we can, you know, drink our lovely herbal teas, we can cook ourselves beautiful, colourful, nutritious meals, and we can avail of medicine when we need to be treated for a condition, using a modern medicinal tool that's been heavily researched, and not going to, you know, practitioners who don't have the relevant qualifications. That's a topic for another day that I'll get into more deeply, because it is a huge one that I feel really passionate about. And, you know, a lot of the time when someone's vulnerable, facing an illness or a treatment plan, chemotherapy, weight loss, there's a huge amount of marketing tailored towards them, and you always have to wonder, what is the motivation of this person telling me to go against modern science and modern, you know, research that's had so much intelligence behind it, so much years of evidence and even regulation to get to the stage that it's at. So that's a conversation for another day, but I will say that if something looks to be too good to be true online, actually send it to me and let's dive into it, because I will do either an episode or a social media piece on it, so that you are not left wondering. That's what I do best. I love myth busting. I hate for people to feel like they're being hoodwinked by marketing regimes that do not care about their health. I'm a pharmacist, so I'll always keep the evidence at the forefront. So yeah, do get in touch with me if there's something you're wondering. Is this a myth? Is this a hoax? Is this a scam? And I will gladly dive into it. It's what I do for fun. So yeah, those are my 5 kind of wellness rules. So just to recap, I think that the early bird catches the worm. I think that it's really important to get your basics right before you go buying wellness tools, tricks, everything else. I think that prevention is better than cure. So wherever we can kind of prevent something and look into it early rather than letting it get worse, that's a huge wellness hack, I suppose. And the other thing is that knowledge is power. So knowing our numbers, that was rule number 4. And finally, if it sounds too good to be true, say it with me. It probably is. So thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of The Wellness Script. I can't wait to start season 2 next week with you. So do stay tuned. And if you missed any episodes, as I said, catch up on them before we kick in to season 2. I hope you enjoy listening. Thank you so much for all your support. It means the world, and it means that we can keep having these wonderful conversations. If you have a topic suggestion, send it in to me. It's Lauren O'Reilly on Instagram, TikTok, or you'll find us on at Wellness Script Pod on all of the channels as well. I will catch you next week with a brand new episode and a brand new season, and until then, I hope that you stay well, stay curious, and stay connected to the people around you.